Hi guys, David here, Almost Daily Science. So today I want to talk about the carnivorous vulture bee, and particularly there's some new research about their gut microbiomes. And so we'll look at this new research, and we'll also just talk a little bit about vulture bees in general, because if you're like me, this is actually the first time that I've run into reference to these creatures, even though they're pretty well known according to my searches on the internet. So I'm looking at this article called Flesh-Eating Vulture Bees Evolved a Gut That Loves Meat. And we see here this first highlight picture is some vulture bees are actually chowing down on what appears to be a piece of raw chicken hung from a rope. So the article says, many entomologists will tell you that bees are basically wasps that became vegetarian, but a little-known genus of tropical stingless bee, Trigona, has evolved to have a particular taste for raw flesh. They even have a special meat-chewing tooth, winning them the charming name of vulture bees. And we'll look at that a little bit closer later. So I looked into it, and it actually looks like wasps are in fact older than bees on the evolutionary tree, and bees are not meat eaters and do not consume prey insects or spiders. However, wasps actually are predators and feed other arthropods and insects to their young. Though in late summer and fall, when the queens stop laying eggs and their nests declines, they're more interested in collecting sweets and other carbohydrates, which we probably all know. These vulture bees, however, are the only bees in the world that have evolved to use food sources not produced by plants, which is a pretty remarkable change in dietary habits. Now, when it comes to microbiomes, they observe that unlike humans whose guts change with every meal, most bee species have retained just about the same bacteria for roughly 80 million years of evolution. And this basically consists of about 5 core microbes that help them with their vegetarian diet. However, the flesh-eating vulture bees have basically a very different microbiome. The key difference is that the vulture bee microbiome is enriched in acid-loving bacteria, which are novel bacteria that their relatives don't have. These bacteria are similar to ones found in actual vultures, as well as hyenas and other carrion feeders, presumably to help protect them from pathogens that show up on carrion. And the article goes on to say, and for those who are particularly adventurous, they do still make edible honey out of meat proteins. I do wonder if vulture bee honey tastes meaty. I've heard that, people who are good taste testers can distinguish the different plants that honey comes from. I've never really tried this, but apparently, clover honey tastes distinctly different from honey that where the pollen was gathered from totally different plants. And so I do wonder if meat honey has a particular flavor. So to answer this question, I did find one article on how to gettingridofbees.com. It's not a particularly scientific description, but it might be from experience. So do vulture bees make honey? Yes, they do, but you wouldn't want to eat it. Why? What does vulture bee honey taste like exactly? Well, for one, vulture bee honey is one of the most gooey and thick forms of honey in the world, and it isn't too sweet either. In fact, it's rather unsweet to human taste buds. It doesn't really answer the question if the honey has like essence of meat to it. Like you can pick up like, oh, there's overtones of clover, or I get a very floral scent from this. Is it like you smell it and it's like, it smells like beef jerky, and then you taste it and you're like, oh yes, it tastes like rotten chicken. But it also says that the vulture bees struggle to produce enough honey for themselves, and that means that collecting vulture bee honey is not only hard but also impractical. So that doesn't really answer my question, but it's pretty close. And so I want to look at the actual paper itself, look at a couple of key figures, and talk about the results. And this is from the American Society for Microbiology, ASM Journals. It's an open access paper, and I've included the link before, and it's called Why Did the Bee Eat the Chicken? Symbiont Gain, Loss, and Retention of the Vulture Bee Microbiome. So the abstract says, in this study, researchers compared the microbiomes of closely related bees that live in the same region but vary in their dietary lifestyles. Some exclusively consume pollen and nectar, others exclusively depend on carrion for their protein, and some consume all of the above. So the first thing that I want to bring out is that we're talking about a specific region in Central America. It looks like actually Colombia, I think, where these bees are found. And what they did is they actually looked at different species of bees in the same geographical area so that they could compare bees that were of different species and had different diets, but with basically the control group was that they were some from the same geographic regions. So I learned some new words in this paper. Specifically, they compared pollinivorous, facultatively necrophagous, and obligately necrophagous bees. And so that word pollinivorous, I guess that's compared to, an omnivore. A pollinivore would be something that just eats pollen. And then a necrophagous animal would be one that consumes dead animals. I suppose that's compared to carnivore, but this is more specific. So I think a necrophagous animal would also be carnivorous, but not all carnivores would be necrophores or necrophagous animals. So that word facultatively, that means that they can be necrophagous, so you'll see them do it sometimes. And then obligately necrophagous means that they have to eat, they only eat dead animals, so decaying animals. So we're comparing pollinivorous, facultatively necrophagous, and obligately necrophagous animals. So when they characterized the microbiomes, they found that there was actually a fair amount of crossover, but also you see some distinct clustering. And so the golden dashed lines are circling the facultative necrophagous bees, whereas the green dotted circle is circling the microbial content of bees that were found to not consume any meat. And then we have the obligate is the purple circle, and that's kind of clustered there in the middle. And so there's some differences, but some key clusters as well. They also looked at the relative abundance of different bacterial genera by host diet. And so, for instance, we have here the scale bar is showing the proportional abundance, and we can see that depending on the diet, you have certain types of microbes over here are differentially expressed. So breaking that down, I want to highlight just a couple of key results before we move on. So one of the things they found is that reversion to a carnivorous lifestyle in the obligately necrophagous bee Trigona necrophagia involved retention of some ancestral core microbes as well as acquisition of new lactic acid bacteria and acetic acid bacteria. And what's interesting is that they're saying this is a reversion to a carnivorous lifestyle. And so I think the idea is that a long time ago you had bees actually derive from wasps, and most of the bees, or maybe all of the bees, adopted a pollinivorous diet. And then what they're saying is so these vulture bees are reverting, according to them. So they actually come from bees and then they are reverting to a carnivorous lifestyle like their ancestral wasps. And so as part of that, they actually keep a lot of the same core microbes as the pollinivorous bees, and then they get new microbes that are associated more with a carnivorous lifestyle, this lactic acid bacteria and acetic acid bacteria. And this new microbiome is likely to provide novel functions to its host. For example, mammalian carnivore microbiomes are enriched in amino acid degradation pathways, while mammalian herbivore microbiomes are enriched in amino acid synthesis pathways. So amino acids being the constituents of proteins. Our findings suggest that the vulture bee microbiome has adapted to the host's novel diet by a combination of novel symbiont recruitment, loss of some ancestral microbes, and then possible adaptation of the ancestral microbes. So they think basically three things happened. They lost some of the ancestral microbes that were associated with a pollinivorous lifestyle. They got new microbes, which are associated with their new lifestyle. And they also think that some of the ancestral microbes associated with a pollinivorous lifestyle have actually adjusted to be more beneficial to this carnivorous or necrophagous lifestyle. Another thing they said that was interesting was, while we did not measure bee gut pH or acidity level in our study, the dominance of acidophilic bacteria, so these lactic acid bacteria and acetic acid bacteria specifically, in the vulture bee gut suggests that an acidic gut environment is important for these bees as well. It says gut acidification appears to be an important adaptation for necrophagous animals. For example, genes involved in vulture, not vulture bee, but vulture gastric acid secretion exhibit signatures of natural selection, and the acidic gut of vultures is thought to defend the birds against pathogens obtained in their food. Similarly, gastric acids and enzymes work together to digest meat in the human gut, suggesting that meat digestion may be facilitated by acidophilic bacteria. So they say, in summary, we found evidence that reversion to a carnivorous lifestyle in an obligate necrophagous bee had profound consequences for its microbiome. The enrichment of acidophilic bacteria in vulture bee guts necessitates future functional studies. So very, very interesting. Kind of creepy, but very cool. So as I said before, I thought this was really interesting new research, but it also introduced to me the topic of vulture bees. I'd never heard of this, so this might be not new to you, but it was new for me, so I thought I would just go through some interesting pictures and facts that I found out about vulture bees. This is not new stuff, but just very interesting. So according to Wikipedia, Trigona is one of the largest genera of stingless bees, comprising about 32 species. And the vulture bees comprise 3 of these Trigona species and are the only bees known to be scavengers. These bees collect and feed on dead animals. And you can see they have this little beak or tooth that's kind of hooked, and I think that's useful for digging into the flesh of dead animals, and I think that's where they get their name specifically of vulture bee, because they do kind of have, it's like a beak-like structure. So you can see here, I think, a different species of the vulture bees, and it's feeding on some kind of rodent, and it's really going to town. So they're getting a lot of work done. You can see, it's gross, I admit, the skeleton or the rib cage of the rodent here, and they're really kind of skeletonizing this thing. This is a picture from, I think, this recent study where we have actually the chicken, the raw chicken, is suspended by a rope. And by the way, this is just like beautiful photography. I think the lighting here is wonderful. And that is kind of funny because the subject matter is quite disgusting. You know, we have these vulture bees are feeding on decaying flesh, but the lighting here is just amazing. So kudos to them for the photography. So we see another picture I found. This is meat-eating bees, Trichona hypagia, eating a dead lizard, photographed by D. Whitman. And you can see here that they've kind of opened up like a hole in the skin, and they're all kind of like eating at the opening in the skin, which is interesting. So here's another picture of Trichona hypagia bees feeding on a lizard carcass, and you can see this one, I don't know if they were the first ones to get to the lizard carcass. Maybe it was already in advanced decayed state, but at this point, there's really almost nothing left of the lizard at this point. In this image, I couldn't find the reference to this paper, unfortunately, but we have the toothed mandibles. So this is a scanning electron micrograph, or perhaps it's a light micrograph of the mandible. Zoomed in, you can see these little tooth-like projections. And then this other part, these are the hind tibia, and they also have these tooth-like projections. You can see zoomed in that they're really quite sharp. And I think that these go a long way towards helping them probably tear into the decaying flesh, and also maybe transporting some of the meat back to the hive with them, because one of the papers that I looked at said that that's one of the things they do, is they actually, not only do they eat the meat when it's there, but they also bring it back home. So this is a meme, but it says, this is a vulture bee. They act like bees, have a queen, live in hives, and so on, but they don't get nectar to make honey. Vulture bees get the meat from dead, rotting animals, hence the vulture part of their names, and they make honey with it. They make meat honey. And the meme shows a guy going, I have a question for God. Why? So I thought that was pretty funny. There's also apparently some fan community surrounding this species. I think I scratched the surface of it. I didn't really want to go too deep, but here is a picture that someone made. This is showing a artistic rendition of a vulture bee, and you can see that she is wearing a leopard print loincloth and top that says "Adopt Me." And she has pointy chompers. Apparently, she also has glossy flappers, which are also known as wings. No sting, and she has sturdy strutters. So that's good to know. And she's holding up meat and kind of salivating a little bit. So apparently, this picture was actually on sale. And so the bad news is that actually the auction is over. So you missed your chance. But the good news is that I have to report that Desert's X Fox actually was able to purchase this for $180, and I'm glad he did, because he was able to beat actually Satan. who was only able to bid $160. And so I think we can all thank Desert X Fox for preventing Satan from getting this picture, because I don't know what he would have done with it. Well, anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and I do hope you'll join me again in the future soon. Bye.